whoa, okay, whoa. It sounded like he was like...
Hi everybody, today is July 3rd, 2025, and this video is part of a video journal in my recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother Paul Kierans be locked up for 588 days. He had Down syndrome, and we visited at will for 64 years. Then when I complained to the RCMP about what I believe to be a fraudulent and forged power of attorney that his group home created to give him the COVID-19 shot, our visits were permanently terminated. He was locked up in his group home for 588 days, and then he died alone at Burnaby Hospital. I believe they did medical assistance in dying on him, which is they did euthanasia on him. I watched as his ventilator was removed. His oxygen mask and his ventilator was removed after he had had a stroke on April 13th of 2024. They allowed me to visit with him for 10 minutes a day, and I believe that they when they found out that the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney had been reopened by the RCMP, they did medical assistance in dying on him so that he couldn't be a witness. They had an oxygen mask on and a ventilator, and that was removed, and he appeared to me to be sedated to death right in front of me. So I watched my little brother, who I grew up with, who I cared for, be euthanized right in front of me as he was struggling to recover. He looked like he was recovering. He had sat up, grabbed a book from my hand, turned the pages. So after Paul died, then the nun, the Catholic nun, my sister, who's been a Catholic nun since Paul was since he was a few months old, in 1959, the group home appointed her as his guardian to give him the COVID-19 secretly. He had 6 siblings living at the time, and they only told the nun, and they secretly, she lives 4,000 kilometers away in North Bay, Ontario, and she's only met Paul on a few dozen occasions over the course of his life. So I practice as a psychologist for the government of British Columbia, working with incapable adults, and then I went to law school, and I was a prosecutor, then a family lawyer for 23 years until I was in an accident and I wasn't able to practice law any longer. But as I said, they locked Paul up after I complained to the police about this fraudulent and forged power of attorney, which still has not been investigated. They terminated my visits with him on a trumped up, saying I was difficult. After 35 years of visits, all of a sudden I was difficult. So I appealed they applied to have me declared a vexatious litigant, which means a troublesome litigant, to take away all my rights, all my civil rights. So they took away all of Paul's normal civil rights under the charter, and then he died. And then they took away all of my civil rights. I can't respond to a court proceeding against me without permission of the court, and I can't proceed against anyone without permission of the court. So I appealed that decision, declaring me a vexatious litigant. My sister's lawyer, she had 3 law firms working for her around the clock, paid for by the Catholic Church, of which I'm also a member. And I estimate they spent $1.5 million, because it was very embarrassing for her, because I could see that the document was a fraud and a forgery. I allege that it's a fraud and a forgery. I don't know if she knew that, but the group home knew that. And then, of course, she had to double down. So this has been the case. I'm almost 70. I'm disabled. I have a heart condition, a potentially life-threatening heart condition. I'm not allowed to be in court for more than 2 hours per day, according to my family doctor and my cardiologist. I have medical certificates. But when the nun brought me to court to take away my rights as a lawyer or as a person, and to have me declared a vexatious litigant, the judge hearing the case went on for full days, even though I had shown her the medical certificate saying that I could only appear in court for 2 hours per day. And I appealed that decision, and I am going to get the reasons for judgment tomorrow. So the decision I appeared and did the appeal last week, and I'm not feeling very positive at all. In my experience, once these judges get something wrong, they just double down and double down and double down. And we've seen that in Canadian. I was just looking up the case of Guy Paul Morin. I don't know if you guys know about that case, but in 1984, he was charged with the murder of a 10-year-old girl, Christine Jessup, his next-door neighbor. He lived in Queensville, Ontario, near Toronto. And he was acquitted by a jury, believe it or not. And the Supreme Court of Canada, the Court of Appeal of Ontario, and then the Supreme Court of Canada set aside the jury acquittal. And so he was incarcerated, even though a jury had acquitted him of the murder. And then in 1995, DNA confirmed that he was not the murderer of Christine Jessup. And I think in 2015, they identified the man who was. It was a guy named Calvin Hoover. So, unfortunately, I just have this feeling. I'm just bringing you along this journey with me. And I would like to tell you a happy story and that things are going to work out tomorrow, but I'm quite sure they will not. The more I think about it, the more likely I think they're going to find a way to not set aside the decision of this judge, because it's so catastrophically bad and it's so unfair, and it is a miscarriage of justice. So of course, Canadian judges have to double down when they get it wrong. And that's why we have the Innocence Project. So I'm going to they're going to post the decision online at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow, Walker versus Kierans. And I'm all ready to go back to the Supreme Court of Canada. As far as I know, the RCMP are still investigating, but they also would show that they had not properly investigated the fraudulent forged power of attorney. They're investigating themselves. Just so that you know, the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, which is an oversight agency for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Ottawa, ordered the Burnaby RCMP to investigate their own investigation of this fraudulent forged power of attorney that was used to lock Paul up for 588 days. But then they don't have any power to tell them how to investigate it, so the RCMP and Burnaby get to investigate themselves. And why on earth would they ever find themselves to have done something wrong? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I went back to the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the RCMP, and I said, they haven't investigated. They've never interviewed me once. They won't meet with me. They won't investigate. They're not doing what you ask them to do. I've now written to every single senator in the Canadian Parliament. I've worked hundreds of hours for my Conservative Party of British Columbia candidate and for my Conservative Party of Canada candidate, and they both lost. And so now we've got this NDP Liberal corrupt useless government. And I don't know when we're going to have confidence motion to overthrow either of these incompetent, corrupt governments. But somebody asked me how I'm getting through all this, and I just say one word: Jesus. You know, Jesus went through a lot worse political and juristic trials than I'm gone through. And I feel that he's standing behind me, and hopefully I'm making it so that if you're faced with this kind of bullying by the Catholic Church or anyone, people say, well, why don't you just leave the Catholic Church? And no, it doesn't belong to my evil nun sister. Why on earth would I leave it? It's my church too. So I would be 80%, I was just telling people that 80% of appeals at the British Columbia Court of Appeal fail, and like I said, I'm quite certain they'll find a way to make sure that I fail tomorrow. I'd like to say otherwise, but and I'd be happily surprised if it turns out that this horrible journey has come to an end, but I doubt it. This is just how I feel right now. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I usually have very good instincts about these things. Anyways, thank you to the people who took the time to watch or at least click on the link to watch my hearing last week. It really does make a difference. I don't know how many people did, but you know, if I don't get some help from somewhere, you know, I don't know if I can, you know, how much longer I can go on. I've funded all of this myself, except for I had briefly had a GoFundMe account, and I raised about $2,400 of a $4,000 goal. But I've spent every penny that I have of my on my old age security and Canada pension. And I've spent 1,000 hours of work. And I'm a really good lawyer. I was a really good lawyer. Never lost a case before I became disabled. So I don't have much choice.
Damn, can paint and rap.
Anyways, so 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. Just check the. You can check out the British Columbia Court of Appeal website. It's the Court of Appeal, and they will have a tab, recent judgments, and just click on that tab and it'll be the first one, because it's going to be released at 10. And if you know anybody that is a lawyer or is in the RCMP or has some kind of political clout, let them know about this miscarriage of justice, because, you know, two disabled people shouldn't have to die before this is, you know, this is over. You know, my little brother has already been locked up for 588 days, and then he died. And they've tormented me. This decision came down last November, so they've tormented me since then. Anyways, I love you all. Take care, everybody.